As she waded through the murky waters, the sunlight that filtered down from above seemed to abandon her, leaving her surrounded by an inky blackness that clung to her skin like a damp shroud. The lake's floor, a soft silt that sucked at her feet, made every step a struggle. Rachel's eyes scanned the dark expanse, her heart racing with every snap of a twig or lurch of a fish beneath the surface. It was supposed to be a relaxing weekend, a chance to get away from the city's constant din and reconnect with nature. But as she stood there, the water lapping at her thighs, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The trees that ringed the lake seemed to loom over her, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching out to snatch her. She had always loved the water, loved the way it made her feel weightless and free. But now, as she stood in the lake's dark heart, Rachel felt like an amphibian sacrifice, offered up to some ancient, aquatic god. The water seemed to be closing in around her, the pressure building in her ears like a scream. A faint buzzing began to vibrate through the water, like the distant hum of a motorboat. Rachel's skin prickled with unease as the sound grew louder, the vibrations coursing through her legs like an electric current. She spun around, trying to locate the source, but the water was opaque, offering no glimpse of what lurked beneath. Suddenly, the buzzing ceased, and the lake fell silent. The stillness was oppressive, weighing her down like a physical force. Rachel's breath came in short gasps, her heart racing with anticipation. She knew she had to get out, to escape the water's crushing grip, but her feet seemed rooted to the spot, her legs heavy as stone. A faint ripple disturbed the surface, a circle of water bulging outward as if something was rising from the depths. Rachel's scream was frozen in her throat as a dark, glistening shape broke the surface. The creature's eyes, two black orbs, locked onto hers, and Rachel felt her very soul shudder. The creature's gaze held her transfixed, a cold, unblinking stare that seemed to pierce her very soul. Rachel's mind reeled, unable to comprehend the horror that was emerging from the depths of the lake. Its body was a twisted mass of scales and fins, a grotesque amalgamation of fish and serpent that seemed to shift and writhe like a living thing. As the creature rose higher, its eyes never leaving hers, Rachel felt a creeping sense of paralysis. Her legs seemed to weaken, her knees buckling beneath her as the water closed around her like a shroud. The air was heavy with a noxious, fishy stench that made her stomach roil. The creature's mouth, a twisted parody of a smile, seemed to grow wider, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. Rachel's scream was finally loosed, a blood-curdling shriek that was swallowed by the surrounding trees as the creature's jaws yawned open, ready to strike. The creature's hot, rank breath enveloped her, making her gag. Rachel's scream was still echoing through the trees as the creature's jaws snapped shut mere inches from her face. The sound of its teeth clicking together was like a crack of thunder, making her jump. The lake's water seemed to boil around her, as if the very fabric of the lake itself was alive and seething. Rachel's legs gave out, and she sank into the water, the creature's eyes still fixed on hers. The darkness closed in, a living, pulsing entity that seemed to have a life of its own. She felt herself being pulled down, down, into the abyssal depths of the lake. The water pressure built in her ears, a crushing weight that threatened to implode her eardrums. As she sank, the creature loomed above her, its eyes burning with an otherworldly intelligence. Rachel's vision began to blur, the water pressure squeezing her brain like a vice. She was running out of air, her lungs burning, as the creature's massive, scaly body blotted out the faint sunlight filtering down from above. The water was a cold, dark shroud that wrapped around her, squeezing the life from her lungs. Rachel's vision began to tunnel, the edges of her sight growing dark and fuzzy. The creature's face, a grotesque parody of a grin, was the last thing she saw before the darkness closed in. But as her consciousness began to slip away, Rachel felt a strange, tingling sensation in her fingers. It was as if the lake itself was stirring, responding to some ancient primal call. The water around her began to churn and froth, as if the very essence of the lake was awakening. The creature's grip on her wrist, like a cold, dead weight, seemed to tighten, pulling her down, into the darkest depths of the lake. Rachel's mind was a maelstrom of terror, her thoughts shattered by the horror that had taken her. And yet, as the darkness closed in, she felt a strange, creeping sense of connection to the lake, as if the water itself was calling to her, claiming her as its own. The water seemed to come alive, tendrils of darkness curling around her like grasping fingers. Rachel's body was a mere vessel, a shell of flesh and bone, as the lake's primal energy surged through her. The creature's grip on her wrist was a cold, impersonal thing, a mere conduit for the ancient power that flowed from the depths of the lake. As the last shreds of her consciousness faded, Rachel felt herself becoming one with the water, her mind dissolving into the darkness like a droplet of ink spreading through clear water. The creature's face, its eyes, its twisted grin, all blurred and faded, replaced by an eternal, formless expanse of dark, liquid power. In that moment, Rachel knew she was no longer human. The lake had claimed her, absorbed her, and remade her in its own image. Her body, now a mere husk, was dragged down, into the depths of the lake, where the ancient ones waited, their cold, dead eyes watching as Rachel's soul was consumed by the abyss.